الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Dear respected brothers and sisters, I welcome you to our weekly lecture in preparing for Ramadan and fasting. And obviously to us, as Muslims, we fast because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to fast. When He said in Surah Al-Baqarah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. So it's part of the 5 pillars of Islam, and it is, without it you cannot be a complete Muslim. If you don't believe in fasting and if we don't observe it, your Islam is incomplete. And however, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do, and whatever He told us to do or not to do, there is a hikmah behind it. There are health benefits from it, there are social benefits, there are mental benefits. The religion is from Allah the Almighty, who knows what is best for humans. And Alhamdulillah, Dr. Sharfuddin, he did research on the effect of fasting on the brain. Brain, my brothers, he is a specialist, I'm just introducing. The brain is the center of everything in our body. Sharfuddin is a consultant neurologist. He works in Ibn Sina Hospital, and he attends our khutbah here. He's a member of our community, and we are honored to have him tonight to speak to you about the benefits of fasting on your brain, our brains.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for the kind words that you have said about me. We have to basically understand what is the human brain's physiology before we go for the benefits and how the benefits of fasting, keeps the physiology of the brain intact. So, first of all, let us go back in history. If we go back in history, way back millions of years ago, when man was a hunter and gatherer, at that time, food was not in plenty. He had to go to the forests, he had to hunt for the food, he had to plan how to hunt for the food and how to be saved from the predators and gather the fruits and vegetables. This was all periodically. Now he would not have a continuous supply of food. So he will get food and then he will have to fast or starve till he goes and hunts again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the brain physiology in such a way that we don't require to take food all the time. We don't have to take, because if we do that, and that is what we are doing at the moment, is wrong. Now we are increasing the calories, and we are not exercising. These are the 2 problems that have happened. Every day taking a lot of food, and then we go and sleep. We sit in front of the television, and we do not exercise. So this causes a negative effect on the brain cells, and the brain cells, they die, and they start dying early and they do not regenerate. Now it's very important to understand that certain regions of the brain cells, they regenerate. For example, let us take one area of the brain which is called as the medial temporal lobe. Now, medial temporal lobe, I will show you on the slides. It is an area where the memory is stored, the memory is encoded, and the memory is retrieved from. It is our hard disk. So in the hard disk of our brains, the neurons get regenerated or they suffer, depending upon what we do. Now, if we fast intermittently, it has been seen experimentally in animals and also in humans that you intermittently fast, then the neurogenesis occurs. New cells form, new memories form, and the memories become very strong. If on the other hand, we are the opposite and we take a continuous fat and diet, then the neurons don't regenerate and they die, and it causes a brain atrophy that we can see on the MRIs, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So, the causes of advanced brain aging is because of increased calorie intake, is because of sedentary lifestyle and then we are not exercising, and also deficiencies of certain minerals and antioxidants. Now, research in the past decade has shown very clearly, both in animals as well as in human beings, that there are two important therapeutic interventions that we can do. And first intervention is intermittent fasting. The second intervention is exercise in moderation. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do everything in moderation. It is absolutely true. And anything we do has to be in moderation. So, intermittent fasting and then exercise are two therapeutic interventions that have got experimental backing, and I'm going to show you how. And how does the neurogenesis occurs and synaptogenesis occurs, and what is neurogenesis and what is synaptogenesis, I'm going to show you that. Now, there are three basic mechanisms which destroy our brain cells, and that is oxidative stress, metabolic stress, and excitotoxic stress. Difficult words to tell you what is oxidative stress, metabolic stress. Now, on a daily basis, supposing you've got a sedentary lifestyle, reactive oxygen species develop in the brain. And these radicals, these reactive oxygen species, they damage the neurons, and that is called as oxidative stress. Similarly, the metabolic, suppose nowadays our life is full of stress, psychological stress. We are on the stress all the time. Because of that, there is a metabolic stress to the brain. And here, there is elevation of cortisol, there is elevation of insulin, and there's an elevation of fat deposits in the body. And this gives rise to increase in the inflammatory cytokines. There is increase in the inflammatory cytokines, which damage the neurons. That's called as a metabolic stress. And the excitotoxic stress is because of increase in the excitatory neurotransmitters in the brain. So these are chemicals in the brain which are either excitotoxic or which are inhibitory. So the excitotoxic neurotransmitters, they increase when we do the negative things, what I'm talking about, sedentary lifestyles and these things, and also in certain diseases which I'm going to discuss later. So basically I'm going to show you the brain of a young person, which you can see, if I can show you. This is the brain of a young person, and you can see that this is the medial temporal lobe, which is called as hippocampi. These are hippocampi. Now hippocampi are the areas where we store our memory. You can see that the hippocampi are full. This is full, you know, which means it is full of cells and the memory is going to be excellent in these persons. Now, if they develop Alzheimer's disease, or because of aging there is a loss of neurons, and because of the negative things that we have done, there is an atrophy of the brain, and you can see here that the hippocampal neurons have become atrophic. You can see big holes in the hippocampi. Not only that, there is a cortical atrophy also occurring, and this is what happens in an Alzheimer's disease or a neurodegenerative disease. But basically, in Alzheimer's disease, there is a loss of neurons in the hippocampi, our hard discs, which I was talking to you about. Now, before we understand further, we have to go to the basic unit of the brain, and that is the neuron. And this is a neuron. A neuron, the basic cell which our brains are made of. An average human brain has about 100 billion neurons. Can you imagine? 100 billion neurons the brain has. Now, the neurons are electrically excitable cells. They are connected to each other. One neuron is connected to possibly 10,000 neurons. And how? We have got what is called as dendrites, and then we have got the axons. Now these are the dendrites, and these are the axons. So the dendrites receive the electricity, and then in the cell, you see that there is a nucleus where you have the DNA. This is the area called mitochondria, and in the mitochondria, the ATP or the energy is generated. These are energy generators. And then there are lysosomes, and the lysosomes, they remove the debris in the neurons, and then the electrical impulses go via the axon to the other neurons, and the connection between the neurons is because of synapses. You can see the synapse there. There is 1 trillion synapses in the brain. Just imagine 1 trillion synapses. It has been estimated that the memory capacity of a human being is between 1 to 1,000 terabytes. Now, if anybody is an expert, they'll be able to tell me what is 1,000 terabytes. I cannot comprehend what is that, but it has to be huge. They gave me an example that if you take the US Congress Library, the total volume is 10 terabytes. So you can imagine 1,000 terabytes is the capacity of the human brain. Enormous, enormous. So, but how to, tap that potential? Very important is how to tap it and how to make the full use of that particular thing. My dear brothers and sisters, the most important thing is we should avoid inadequate lifestyle. What I told you, inadequate lifestyle, overeating, becoming obese, lack of exercise, this is a bad thing. It's a inadequate lifestyle. What happens? Your body and the brain, they develop reactive oxygen species that causes multiple effects. One is insulin resistance. The glucose becomes high because the insulin is not capable of metabolizing the glucose. Visceral obesity, abdominal obesity. Visceral obesity is an abdominal obesity. High blood pressure, high sugar, and high lipid profile, that is high cholesterol, triglycerides and all this. All these put together is known as the metabolic syndrome, and a metabolic syndrome is a very bad thing for the brain. What does it do? It increases the aging. It, increases the aging process of the brain. Experiments have been done right from 1935 in animals to see how can we get the appropriate lifespan of an individual and the appropriate lifespan of the brains of individuals. All of the experiments have come to the same conclusion that intermittent fasting is the most effective way of extending the lifespan in mammals. Extending the lifespan means we cannot extend the lifespan, everybody knows. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us an appropriate lifespan. But because of our inadequate lifestyles, we reduce it, we shorten it. So if we have to be an appropriate lifespan, then we have to follow healthy ways of living. Now let us go to the molecular benefits of fasting. I just told you the other benefits which were macromolecular. Now at the molecular level, it is seen and it is demonstrated that fasting is a kind of stress. You're shocking the brain cells. But that is good, in a good way. In a good way, you're shocking the brain cells. And it is a stress response. So what happens is, very interesting, there is increase in certain proteins in the brain which is called as chaperone proteins. Now what does chaperone protein do? Is, now in neurodegenerative diseases, within the neurons, what I showed you, there is misfolding of certain proteins. And misfolding of certain proteins damages the neurons and the neurons die. And fasting increases the chaperone proteins, and chaperone proteins doesn't allow the proteins in the neurons to get misfolded. So misfolding of the proteins is removed. So that's a very important aspect of what chaperone protein do, and chaperone proteins are increased by fasting. And these chaperone proteins are increased in the hippocampi. I showed you the hippocampi, which is our hard disk. And also in the striatal neurons. The striatal neurons contain dopamine. And if there is a problem there, you develop Parkinson's disease. And they protect the neurons. Now these chaperone proteins, they protect the neurons against oxidative stress and excitotoxic stress. The other very important benefits is neurotropic factors. Fasting increases certain factors in the brain which are called as neurotropic factors, and one of the most important neurotropic factor is the brain-derived neurotropic factor. So it's called as a brain-derived growth factor, or BDGF. There is also increase in the glial cell-derived growth factor. Now these growth factors, they increase our neurons in the hippocampi. I showed you the hippocampi, our hard disk. These neurotropic factors increase the neurons. How? By intermittent fasting. So such an important thing. See, it is not at one level that is acting. It is from all levels. The fasting is trying to help the brain to attain optimal lifespan. It also increases the glucose effectiveness and increases the insulin responsiveness. Then, when we fast, for the first 10 hours of fasting, our liver gives off glycogen. So glycogen is utilized. After the 10 hours or 12 hours, there is lipolysis, means the fat starts breaking down into ketone bodies. And the ketone bodies are utilized by the brain, which is an excellent fuel for the brain because it helps the brain in neurogenesis again. It also protects the brain from seizures. So patients who are having seizures can go for fasting. In fact, we give them ketogenic diets which contains more fat, especially in children. Children who have got refractory epilepsy, we give them more fat so that they develops ketone bodies, and ketone bodies, they protect the brain against seizures. Such an important thing. So fasting increases ketone bodies. Now fasting regulates the inflammatory cytokines. There are certain inflammatory cytokines which are damaging to the brain and those are reduced. Certain cytokines which are helpful to the brain are increased. So cytokines is another aspect where there are molecular benefits of fasting. Then there is endocrinal importance because fat releases a hormone which is called as leptin, and leptin is associated with increase or optimization of thyroid activity hormones, and apodictin is another hormone which increases in fasting and protects the neurons against the metabolic stresses. So it's such an important thing. From different aspects, the brain is being helped. So what happens now, we have just, I'm summarizing that increase in the neurotropic factors, the BDNF, the FGF2, HSP70, all these things are increased, enhancing the neuronal network plasticity and increasing neurotropic factors, increasing stress resistance. That is, when you are exposed to stress, your resistance increases. The resistance of the neurons increases if you are fasting. Not only that, I showed you the mitochondria. The mitochondria, the powerhouses of the brain. Now they increase, which means more energy is produced. We have all experienced that fasting increases our alertness. We are able to do more activity if we are fasting correctly. I mean, we should have prepared ourselves before Ramadan. Not that suddenly you start fasting and then it will create a problem. You slowly start to do, calorie restriction, and then slowly you go for Ramadan. So that is how it helps. So it also reduces the inflammation in the brain. So the conclusion is that physiologically our feeding patterns are just like our ancestors, and that is feast and famine, feast and fast, feast and fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made our brains like that. We are geared like that, and we have been wired like that. Feast and fast. But today's life is a constant mental activity. There's no time for physical activity. Human physiology remains the same as Adam alayhi salam to now. It remains the same. It's very important to realize that intermittent fasting and exercise would go a long way to maintain healthy brain and quality of life. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Sharfuddin. Beautiful lecture. I personally enjoyed it very much, and I hope you did so. It tells you that our religion and everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained for us is beneficial to us. And this is proven through science, through authentic research, that fasting is healthy, is beneficial to our mental health, to our brain, and to all the other benefits. So I thank him very much for this beautiful lecture. I feel sorry that you have to hear so many scientific terms. Those of you in science have been enjoying it. We have a doctor here of the pediatrist. So he must have also enjoyed. But I think the idea is that fasting is useful. Believe me, it's good. So if you have any question, doctor is here to answer your questions. Okay.
Thanks for the presentation, doctor. I just want to ask, the capacity of the human brain, as you told, it's 100 terabytes and whatever.
1,000 terabytes.
1,000 terabytes. So, has any human being used, what is the maximum capacity a human being has utilized? Do you have any research on this one? And how can we increase to use that capacity?
The estimate is about 10% of the brain only we utilize. Maximum. So we don't have the capacity to do more than that. We do not know why. But the thing is, we can try. And how to try is, see, when you are trying to, for example, if you take the memory, there are 4 components in memory. First is you register an information. For example, I am giving you an information. All depends upon your concentration. How much you have concentrated. That much you have registered. You said 1 terabyte, and Sheikh says 1,000 terabytes, absolutely right. So shows his concentration. So concentration is concentration is a very important fact for registration of any particular thing. That's one. Then there is a consolidation of memory. Consolidation of memory depends upon, once you have heard a lecture, then you go and sleep properly. Your food intake should not be heavy, you know. You should take an appropriate amount of food, and then you should sleep properly for 7 to 8 hours, where consolidation of memory occurs. Once consolidation occurs, there is a storage of memory for a longer time, and then there is a retrieval of memory when it is to be used. The 4 components are there. So all depends upon these things, what you're doing. You may be sitting in a class, but your mind may be somewhere else. Finished. If that is so, your concentration is not there. So that's why every student has got a different capacity of concentration. So concentration is very important. And then your physiology is also important. Do you have that capacity of neurogenesis and synaptogenesis? Have you developed that since a long time? It's a matter of developing things. It's not overnight that you can develop synaptogenesis or neurogenesis. You have to go on, and then, yes, you can do, why not?
Assalamu alaikum. I work with a lot of non-Muslims, and they see the benefits of fasting actually, and the research is pointing towards that direction. But the one question they often raise is about drinking the water. They seem to be shocked that we don't drink water. Is there actual research that backs the not taking water as well? Because I've not come across this, whereas the food I've seen and heard plenty of. Over to you.
It's a very interesting question. Scientific background, we don't have that. Science says take water. You restrict calories, but you drink water. That is what, we are not at that level probably. Probably another, 50 years probably will show that even restriction of water is going to be more beneficial. At the present moment, it says no, you have to restrict calories, but you have to take enough water. That is what. So they don't believe that. So maybe we are not adequate, you see. We don't have that much. And even if you read the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have given you very little knowledge. So there it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Saeed, pediatrician, as he mentioned. Although I'm sorry that I couldn't attend from the beginning because I come very far away. Now, in general, what we know that all of us, we feel tired in the first 2 or 3 days. And then everybody of us telling that, no, it's adapted, I don't feel that Ramadan or I'm fasting activity is normal. The other observation, some people believe that maybe fasting is a good time to lose weight, and I don't believe it actually. I think I checked myself, it remains the same. Now the thing is that, what I believe as a general people, that the food habit we are taking now, suppose we take the breakfast, lunch and dinner. And in the month of fasting, month Ramadan, we just change the timing. Suhoor, I don't know if everybody has the same practice or not. Suhoor we are taking as a meal, which I could say is a dinner. And then we take immediately after the adhan, we take the breakfast, which fasting the break, it could be breakfast. And then we take another food actually, many of us is a practice. Now my question is that, is it the changes occurs in the body that you mentioned in the brain, or it is the food habit that we divert in the timing only the gap? So how the body adjusted?
Very interesting question. The thing is, what we are doing in Ramadan is absolutely wrong. We are not following the rules of Sarkar Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And what we do is, after fasting, we eat like anything. It is more than the ordinary days. Because we are hungry, the hypothalamus is set in such a way that, okay, you did not take food, but the moment you start taking food, we hog. We eat and eat and eat and overeat. That is not the way it is. That's what I'm telling. Training the mind before Ramadan is very, very important, and keep it trained throughout Ramadan. You have to take lesser calories. Our brain does not require that much amount of calories what we take at all. That is why we are developing obesity, we are developing morbid obesity, and we are developing all complications of obesity because of our habits which are not good. So let it be Ramadan, let it be not Ramadan, we are not following the principles of Islam. That is the basic problem that we have. And because of that we are suffering. So I would suggest, my brothers and sisters, that please train yourself in such a way that when you fast and when you break the fast, don't overeat. Eat little bits, and you can eat another 2-3 times, there's no problem, but don't overeat. That is counterproductive to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. And why is He giving us fasting? I showed you so much that, from all points, the brain activity is increasing so much that we are making a detrimental thing by overeating again. That is it.
Anybody else? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, how are you, doctor? First of all, about this amount of food, I think that I read some kind of exercises for the sumo wrestlers, that they fast themselves for a while, then they like shock their body with a huge amount of food. So I think that kind of practice is for sumo wrestling, not for a healthy diet, maybe. But my question would relate to my brother here. That I guess that I read some German doctor book. He was talking about fasting, but without stopping consuming water, and that have all immense benefits for the hinges, for his knees, for something like that. He was suffering from something, but water is like a mandatory. It's like something like you cannot stop. So I don't know if fasting really in Islamic way, it have the same benefits or not. It's gonna have the same benefits or not.
Jazakallah khair.
Thank you for the question. The thing is, scientific evidence of fasting is different from the Islamic way. I'll tell you how. There are two principles that are involved in Western way of fasting that they have. One pertains to Islamic fasting. What they have done is 2 days in a week, not consecutive, 2 non-consecutive days they fast. Rest of the 5 days they eat like anything. And then they say that this helps. This is Sunnah. This is Sunnah. Monday and yes, Thursday. So this is Sunnah. The other thing is, water intake, according to the Western experimental background that we have, it says you have to take water. You cannot stop taking water. So that's why I'm telling you, we are still not adequate. See, our maker is telling don't take water. There's something which we don't understand. What we understand is you have to hydrate yourself. But we have to know that each food that we take has plenty of water. Plenty. You don't have to take macromolecular extra water when you're taking the food and you have already taken 2 glasses of water, 3 glasses of water. That is more than sufficient to take us for the next 17 hours. We have not reached, as a scientific community, we have not reached that stage, so we don't know. We are ignorant.
There is no such researchers about that?
Such research is not there. There is no such research. The animals have been subjected to either calorie restriction of 500 kilocalories on 2 days in a week. Rest of the thing they give ad libitum. Ad libitum means they just leave them. But for 2 days, non-consecutive days, they give 500 kilocalories, but water is given as and when they want water. So we don't have a scientific, any study I do not know of where complete water restriction as an Islamic way, they have not done. So I am basically quoting you the National Institute on Aging. It is the biggest institute on aging and aging related studies. So Professor Mark Matson, he has done a great job and he's still doing a great job on how to increase the brain activity and neurogenesis. And according to his experiments, my references are through him. So, I mean, no reference talks about complete stoppage of water and like what we do in an Islamic way. So I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, we have a sister. Sorry, blocked your camera.
One of the sisters would like to know, is there a way that we can increase our concentration?
The most important way is to train our mind. The most important thing is, basically we don't train it, and actually there's a difference between males and females. I'll tell you how. Females can do multitasking very well. You know, it has been proven experimentally that you can do this without any problem. That is multitasking. Whereas males can't do that. Males can do one task at a time. That is probably related to the concentration and the attention span. You have to develop an attention span first, which means that if you are doing a certain job, or if you're attending a lecture, or if you're reading something, your attention should be there and there itself. That increases the concentration. If the concentration is there, the memory is going to be consolidated. And for further consolidation, you have to have a appropriate diet and sleep well, and take the appropriate food. If you do all that and you don't sleep, it will not be consolidated. The memory will not be consolidated. You will not be able to retrieve that memory at all. So sleep is very, very important after you have taken the information. So first is concentration, attention, good food, appropriate food, and then sleep. Sleep for 7-8 hours. Then only your memory gets consolidated and you will be able to retrieve the memory.
Excellent. Okay, we'll see. We have 3 brothers there and there.
Assalamu alaikum. During your end of your presentation, you just mentioned one little sentence that immediate fasting, entering into the fasting would also not be good, and we need to train ourselves, which you also explained in your previous answer. So do you mean training, like is it like we need to start fasting during the month of Shaban itself, or is it something else?
Give to the other one. Can we let the minute class? Yes. We're going to test your memory.
Assalamu alaikum. First of all, Jazakallah khair. It was a very informative lecture. I gained a lot from it personally. I wanted to make a comment first of all about a topic that's been discussed a couple of times regarding the water and the research about water. Is there any research that is closer to the way we fast as Muslims, 30 consecutive days, without water or with water? Because there are people saying that water is necessary, but there's no research to say that water is necessary if you're fasting for 30 days. So to make it a fair test, there needs to be research that is closer to the way we fast as Muslims. Okay. That was a comment. My question to you is, what can you tell me about the metabolic rate and how that affects the brain during fasting? Because obviously our metabolic rate is less during fasting. How does that affect our brain?
Okay, I think 2 questions. Okay. Later. You have to be kind on our speaker.
Well, thank you very much for the question. You want to know about the metabolic rate as to what happened. The metabolic rate comes down, and then there is I showed you that there is an increase in the leptin and aponeptin, two hormones that are released from the fat cells when you fast, and the purpose of this is to modulate the thyroid activity towards normal. So it is modulated towards the normal state. But however, a regular fast will increase your parasympathetic activity. So what is parasympathetic activity? It reduces your heart rate, it reduces your blood pressure, it increases the sinus arrhythmia. What does it mean? These are all very normal values. Normally what happens, our heart rate is on the higher side because we have not trained ourselves. It will be on the higher side, our blood pressure will be higher side, and the variability of heart rate which is there is usually not there. But with fasting, the heart rate comes down, blood pressure comes down, and the variability of the heart rate increases. That is a very important thing. And the leptin, it normalizes the thyroid activity. So it is phenomenal what these changes do. And what was your question? Yes, you said about Shaban, whether we should. I think so. We should train from Shaban. And we should not shock ourselves suddenly. We are eating like anything in Shaban, and then Ramadan comes, suddenly we go for 17 hours fast. Is not good. Because it is just like that. For example, a person who's sedentary, I tell him to run 5 kilometers suddenly, he will not get up for 2 days. So it is like that. You cannot. You have to train yourself to run a marathon. So to run a marathon, you have to, start slow and go slow. Then only you'll be able to do a marathon race. Of course, you'll be able to do, anybody can do that. The thing is how you train yourself, and similarly for Ramadan, you have to train yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. Actually, I have two questions. One is there any particular brain exercise where you can improve concentration, memory, everything? Is there any particular brain exercise during fasting and when you don't fast? This is the first question. Second question is, you see even the ants, they have a brain. The ants. How they have this thinking power, because I have seen some videos where they think and then they form a line to a certain extent to go from A to B. So how they have this thinking power, ants the size of the ant and all that. And then you said the memory has 1000 terabyte of storage order. So how is this happening?
Thank you. There are 3 questions in that one question. And what you said is, are there any ways to increase the memory during fasting? Ways is again, when you fast, your brain becomes sharp. You must be noticing. Every one of us notices that when we fast the correct way, supposing we have trained ourselves in such a way and we started to fast, then we can do more mental activity than when we have taken food. Similar, you can take an example of, supposing you take the afternoon food and you don't take an afternoon nap and you go and work, your brain is foggy, it is groggy, you cannot do work. Whereas, if you are half stomach full, for example, as what is Islamic? Islamic is 1/3 of the stomach should be left vacant. 1/3 is food, 1/3 is water and air, and the 1/3 is you left vacant. That is very important. We should not overeat, and if you do that, your concentration capacity increases. That's what I'm telling you, don't hog yourself. Don't take the full up till here, and then after that, you can't do anything. Your mental capacity goes way down. So to have a good mental capacity, you have to take little amount of food, and then during fasting you will see that your concentration will be terrific, will be very good. I am not an entomologist to tell you about ants and what happens in the ants. I don't have any idea about that, so I don't want to even stretch my imagination as to what it is. Sorry, I cannot answer that question.
Okay, any other question? Okay, Ishan. I think the adhan is close. Okay, 4 minutes. Sisters, any other sister has a question? We learned today that sisters are multitasking. May Allah bless them. As they are listening, they have baby kids, baby children taking care of them. They are maintaining the peace, otherwise this lecture hall will be taken over by the little children. So may Allah bless them. And I really personally, I try to do it's too much for a man. Housework, the multitasking, we just go. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created differently, and we complement each other. We are good at certain things, they are good at certain things. We'd like to thank Dr. Sharfuddin for this beautiful lecture.